those rates are continuing to fall faster than ever. Last year,
I know what short-barreled rifles are qualified as in the National Firearms Act.
As quick as I depress the trigger of this Glock 19, a round comes out of the chamber.
This term, it deals with gun rights, and here the Supreme Court has upheld a law.
The restraining order against them should have access to a gun.
Firearms rule legal battle. The National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1968 are pivotal pieces of federal legislation that regulate arms in the United States. Both laws impose strict requirements on the manufacturing, selling, and transferring of certain types of arms, including short-barreled rifles. These regulations are enforced by the ATF, which periodically updates its rules to address new developments in arms technology and usage. One such update involved the classification of arms equipped with stabilizing braces. These braces are designed to assist shooters in stabilizing their aim, particularly for individuals with disabilities. However, there has been controversy over whether arms with these braces should be classified as pistols or as SBRs, which are subject to more stringent regulations under the NFA. To address this issue, the ATF issued a proposed rule that suggested using a point system to determine the classification of arms with stabilizing braces. This point system would assess various characteristics of the arm to decide whether it should be considered a braced pistol or a rifle. Following the proposed rule, the ATF published a final rule that formalized this classification system. However, the final rule faced legal challenges from various plaintiffs who sought injunctive relief. They argued that there were statutory deficiencies in both the process and the substance of the final rule. Specifically, they contended that the ATF did not adhere to the Administrative Procedure Act's requirements for notice and comment, which mandate that the public be given a meaningful opportunity to provide feedback on proposed regulations. The plaintiffs also raised constitutional challenges against the final rule. Despite these arguments, the district court denied their request for injunctive relief. When the district court did not rule quickly on the subsequent motion for an injunction pending appeal, the plaintiffs sought relief from the appellate court. The Fifth Circuit granted an injunction, temporarily halting the enforcement of the final rule against the named plaintiffs and extending that interim relief. The Fifth Circuit then reversed the district court's order denying a preliminary injunction and remanded the case with instructions to consider the motion for a preliminary injunction expeditiously. The appellate court's decision was based on the determination that the final rule was, in fact, a legislative rule. As such, it was required to comply with the APA's procedural requirements for notice and comment. The court found that the ATF's final rule did not logically follow the proposed rule, indicating that the public was not given a fair chance to comment on specific aspects of the rule that were ultimately included. This lack of a logical connection between the proposed rule and the final rule constituted a monumental error, which the court deemed prejudicial. Due to these procedural deficiencies, the Fifth Circuit concluded that the final rule must be set aside as unlawful. Alternatively, the case could be remanded for appropriate remediation, which would involve reinitiating the rulemaking process to ensure compliance with the APA's notice and comment requirements. The court's decision underscores the importance of procedural fairness in the rulemaking process, particularly when it comes to regulations that have significant implications for individual rights and public safety. By requiring the ATF to adhere to the APA's requirements, the court aims to ensure that all stakeholders have a meaningful opportunity to participate in the development of federal regulations. ATF's pistol brace rule overturned. U.S. District Court Judge Reed O'Connor didn't mince words in his recent decision in Mock v. Garland. He vacated the ATF's final rule, which reclassified pistols with braces as short-barreled rifles subject to the National Arms Act of 1934. His ruling was based on the ATF violating the Administrative Procedure Act's procedural requirements and being arbitrary and capricious. This controversial rule emerged after President Joe Biden reacted to the 2020 Boulder, Colorado shooting, where the perpetrator used an arm with a brace. The ATF had previously maintained for nearly a decade that a pistol brace did not convert a pistol into an NFA-regulated rifle. However, in January 2023, under Biden's administration, the ATF changed its stance, claiming that design changes in braces necessitated this reclassification. The ATF's sudden shift prompted William Mock, with support from the Firearms Policy Coalition, to file a lawsuit against the agency. In August 2023, an appeals court ruled in their favor, stating that the final rule was not a logical extension of the proposed rule, and that this significant error was prejudicial. Consequently, the court declared the rule unlawful and mandated it to be set aside. Judge O'Connor, who was appointed by President George W. Bush in 2007, has a history of challenging anti-arm legislation. A long-standing member of the Federalist Society, he previously ruled a portion of the Gun Control Act of 1968 unconstitutional, although that decision was later overturned on appeal. In his recent ruling, O'Connor indicated that the plaintiffs, in their motion for summary judgment, had claimed that the final rule violated the APA's procedural requirements. They argued that it was not a logical outgrowth of the proposed rule, that the defendants acted arbitrarily by failing to consider important aspects of the problems presented and caused by the final rule, that the defendants impermissibly extended their statutory authority under the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1968, and that it violated various aspects of the United States Constitution. O'Connor further argued that the final rule failed to meet the APA's procedural requirements for notice and comment, which include providing the public a meaningful opportunity to comment on the proposed rule. He noted the rule was not a logical outgrowth of the proposed rule and that this error was substantial and prejudicial. The case has sparked significant discussion within the legal and arm rights community. Critics of the ATF's rule change argue that it represents an overreach of executive power, driven more by political agendas than by sound legal principles. They contend that the ATF's justification for the rule, that changes in brace designs necessitated the reclassification, was insufficient and lacked substantive evidence. On the other hand, supporters of stricter arm regulations argue that such measures are necessary to address arm violence, and that reclassifying pistols with braces as SBRs is a reasonable step toward ensuring public safety. They believe the ATF's action was in line with broader efforts to regulate arms more effectively and reduce the potential for their misuse. This ruling is not expected to be the end of the legal battles over arm regulations, particularly those involving accessories like braces. The issue of balancing Second Amendment rights with public safety concerns remains a contentious and polarizing topic in the United States. Looking ahead, the ATF may seek to revise its rulemaking process to address the court's criticisms or pursue other regulatory strategies to achieve its objectives. Meanwhile, arm rights advocates will likely continue to challenge any perceived overreach by federal agencies, reinforcing the ongoing legal tug-of-war over arms regulation. ATF's overreach struck down. The court's ruling, penned by Judge Reed O'Connor, focused on the procedural overreach by the ATF, rather than delving into the potential Second Amendment violations. This approach effectively highlighted the agency's failures in adhering to established legal processes. O'Connor's critique of the ATF was scathing. He noted that the adaptation of the final rule was both arbitrary and capricious. He pointed out two main reasons for this conclusion. Firstly, the ATF did not provide a detailed justification for reversing its long-standing position on pistol braces. Secondly, the standards set forth in the final rule were deemed impermissibly vague. These shortcomings were sufficient to invalidate the rule without needing to address the broader constitutional issues. The judge further condemned the ATF for its lack of transparency and due process. He emphasized that the agency's disregard for fair notice and its failure to consider reliance interests significantly undermined its position. This was exacerbated by the ATF's neglect of the Administrative Procedures Act requirements, which mandate public notice and the opportunity for comment. The ATF's procedural failings were thus central to the court's decision to vacate the rule. The Firearms Policy Coalition, which played a pivotal role in challenging the ATF's rule, celebrated the court's decision as a major victory. The organization had argued that the ATF's actions were not only legally flawed, but also represented an overreach that threatened to criminalize millions of law-abiding arm owners. In response to the ruling, FPC President Brandon Combs remarked that the ATF's attempt to enforce the new regulation was a clear example of the agency's hostility towards arm owners. He lauded the decision as a triumph for the arm community, emphasizing that the ruling demonstrated the power of collective action against what he termed an immoral government overreach. Combs' statement underscored the sense of vindication felt by arm rights advocates. He highlighted the importance of the legal victory, expressing confidence in defending the win through any potential appeals. Although the ATF may consider appealing O'Connor's ruling, the agency faces a challenging path. The courts have repeatedly ruled against the ATF's attempts to extend its authority beyond reasonable limits, making further appeals seem unlikely to succeed. For now, the ruling provides significant relief to the owners of an estimated 10 million braced arms. These individuals, who face the prospect of becoming felons under the new ATF rule, can temporarily rest easy. The court's decision has not only vacated the contentious rule, but also reaffirmed the importance of procedural adherence and transparency in regulatory actions. This legal skirmish is a reminder of the ongoing tension between regulatory agencies and individual rights. The court's ruling in Mock v. Garland is a pivotal moment in this broader struggle, showcasing the judiciary's role in curbing overreach and ensuring that regulatory bodies operate within the bounds of the law. The case also highlights the critical role of advocacy groups like the FPC in defending constitutional rights and holding government agencies accountable. That's all for this video, folks. We'll see you next time.